Excellent!
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Paul's Hardware. This is my review video on the Fractal Define R4 computer case, and I'm reviewing the windowed side panel edition. Thing is, I haven't actually built anything in this computer case yet. I haven't done much more than doing an overview video for it over on our Newegg TV YouTube channel. That's my day job. So if you want to see all of these specs and some detailed close-ups and some very fancy camera work with this particular case, you can check that out. It's available on our Newegg TV YouTube channel. What I'm going to be doing today is actually building a system in this case. So I will be returning to you guys very shortly to provide you my feedback and my thoughts on the actual build process. And also some more information on that build is going to be available in another video on my channel. I hope this isn't all getting too confusing. But I will be right back. Probably tomorrow is when I will shoot the review part of this video. I'm going to go ahead and do my build in the Fractal Define R4. And I'm back, and as you can see, my build is now complete. I'm happy to say it went off without a hitch, and all of my initial thoughts about the Fractal Define R4 were pretty much verified as I went through the build process. So I'm going to give you guys a closer look at that while I talk about some of my pros and cons of this case and the build. First off, of course, build quality, and that is something that Fractal is definitely doing a really good job with. Throughout the case, you'll notice very sturdy and reinforced panels all the way through. You typically do not see much bowing or flexing as you're working with the case. And one thing about the side panels on the case in particular, typically I don't like these types of side panels that kind of have the hooks along the top and the bottom, and you lay it up flat and then slide it into place. Usually that's because with lower build quality those side panels flex and bend, and it's a lot harder to get them back on and lined up properly. However, with this case, because again the build quality is there, the side panels do slide on and off without too much trouble at all. Second thing to point out is space. There's just tons of it in this case. I was installing an eATX motherboard, even though this case is not necessarily verified to fit that size. However, it was able to fit it. Part of the reason is because there is some space between the motherboard tray and the drive cages. A bit of an extra gap there, so even though I covered up the grommets that you're supposed to use, I was able to still route the cables through that gap and get them all hooked up properly. Another thing is the grommets themselves. I did use a few of them, especially at the top. The thoughtful one they put at the top middle was very helpful for me, and they're really high quality. They stay in place. I've worked with some cases before where when you try to push the cable through the grommet and then you're cinching it down, it just pulls the grommet off of the routing hole. That's always a pain in the butt. Never happened with this case. Also, plenty of space behind the motherboard tray. So even if you're routing cables over the top of the 24-pin motherboard, main motherboard power connector, for example, yeah, still plenty of space to do that. And even with the side panel on, really wasn't any trouble at all. Another good point here is that they've provided you with two positions for the top 240mm radiator position. The reason is if you position it in the middle, it looks a little bit more symmetrical. However, I was really happy that they put the second position for it, which is spaced a little bit further away from the motherboard tray, because I would not have been able to use this configuration if they did not. So I thought that was really thoughtful. It's just as much as adding a couple more holes to the top of the case to give you another mounting position for it. But due to the heat sinks that are on my Gigabyte motherboard, there's really just about no clearance between the radiator and the motherboard. They're almost right up against each other. If I didn't have that second position, I would not have been able to install it in this configuration, and I would have either had to go with a thinner radiator or thinner fans. But I can at least confirm that this motherboard fits in this case. This radiator, the Thermaltake Water 2.0, fits in this case with this motherboard, but your mileage may vary. Don't assume this is going to fit with every motherboard, because it's going to depend on the heat sinks that are on the motherboard itself and what kind of clearance you have at the top of that motherboard, as opposed to whatever radiator you're using. So I might recommend a thinner radiator for this case, such as the H100, as opposed to this one that I use here, or just make sure that your motherboard doesn't have too much going on up at the top edge of it. One other thing I wanted to point out is that they did do the thoughtful addition of adding a couple 2.5 inch SSD mounting points on the back of the motherboard tray. I did not end up using those. The reason was because I felt too locked in if I was going to use those mounting points, because pretty much if you mount a motherboard, if you mount an SSD at the back and screw it in and then put your motherboard in, you have to remove your motherboard to remove that SSD. And since I tend to swap drives around, it just wasn't going to make sense for me. So I skipped that. I just mounted it up in the front for now, and I have a bunch of other drives I'm probably going to end up dropping in here. Also, if you guys noticed, I guess some of the rest of the hardware in here, I got the Intermax Platimax in there. Also got an Asus GTX 670 video card, which you can see there. Looks really nice through the side panel window with the heat pipes on it. And I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. I would appreciate it if they maybe took those 2.5 inch drive mount points behind the motherboard tray, just did the little pop out with some mounting points there, so that way you can mount it from the side rather than through the back of the motherboard tray. That might solve that problem, allow you to still have those handy mounting points back there. And because I think what you're really going for there is if you use those and just use the lower drive cage here, you can remove that middle one and get the extra airflow. But yeah, that's just my only thought, really my only quibble about this case that I could seriously come up with. So yeah, pretty much verified all my original thoughts. Excellent case. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 for my overall rating. But that is going to do it for this video. This has been my review of the Fractal Define R4 mid-tower computer case with the side panel window. I'm Paul, and you've been watching Paul's Hardware. We'll see you all in the next video.